This commentary is not intended to be investment advice, investment research, or recommendation. Please consult your investment professional for your own circumstances.
Hi, everyone. This is Peter Hans. Welcome to this week's episode of Between Two Chains. I am extremely excited about this week because I have a return guest and someone who I am, just love listening to and talking to. And, over the past year plus, going on year and a half, it's one of the, very, very few, I would call it Web3/NFT projects that I've been personally involved in and, gotten my son involved in. My daughters are aware of it. And just, I think it's incredibly interesting. So Jeff French was on from Blockpacks about a little over a year ago now. And
it was like yesterday,
back.
But it has been a while.
Yeah. I mean, I remember it was like right after the first Blockpacks drop, I participated in personally and was just kind of getting my feet wet. And, now I'm pretty involved in the community and it's awesome. And, for those listeners who maybe didn't hear the first episode, or I would definitely recommend going back and checking it out. It was back when we were doing the show through Real Vision. But, what drew me into Blockpacks originally was the theme of tying NFTs, which it really is just a technology in my view, to in real life, real world assets. And in this case, it was kind of perfect for me because it was predominantly started with sports cards and something I had, gotten back into heavier with my son as he got older. And with COVID happening, it was just kind of a perfect storm and really rekindled my interest. And I think Blockpacks was a big part of that because it also married it with blockchain and NFT infrastructure. So now fast forward and there's a lot of iteration to the Blockpacks project, still keeping true to, I think, what NFTs ultimately represent, but also taking on a new life. So Jeff, or Frenchie, whichever you prefer me to call you on this show. How have you seen kind of the iteration of what you're doing and where you think it's going?
Yeah, so it's been a wild and crazy 18 or so months for sure. It's like I need to go back and just listen to that early podcast myself and just kind of see where we were then, because when you're in this, it really does. Time kind of stands still when you're developing a technology that's moving at the pace of this entire space right now. So week really does feel like a month. A month feels like a year. It's pretty crazy, and you can't appreciate that until you're in it and doing it. But to your point, I mean, I think we've tried to have a North Star. We've tried to stay true to that North Star and bringing IRL collectors in, creating digital collectible adventures and finding ways to do that. And I think one of the easiest ways for people to understand is this idea that you're going to come in, you're going to have some pack ripping type experiences that you're accustomed to. You're going to play some games that you may be somewhat accustomed to from your real life. And at the end of that rainbow, there's going to be an NFT that's tied to a real physical collectible. So they know that value proposition, and that has continued to be a really good on-ramp for us. And I'm not aware of anyone, I always hate to say, because there's just stuff that I have blind spots, but I'm not aware of any platform that has onboarded more IRL collectors into self-custody than we have. You have the big closed platforms, you have NFL All Day that Flow's doing great products over there with that and NBA Top Shot, but they're different. You're onboarding into a true digital experience, but one that is walled off, so to speak. And that can still be a great stepping stone. I appreciate what they're doing. A lot of people, that may be their first way in and they move over. That's great. But I think as far as the true self-custody side, not my keys, not my coins, the old crypto saying, same thing with these collectibles. Once you get these NFTs that represent this ownership, they're yours. They're in your wallet. We can't stop you from transferring them if we wanted to. We can't shut your account off. That true crypto ethos and that self-custody. And I think we have right now, I believe we have the best on-ramp in the space for that right now. And I think we've stayed true to that North Star. And like you said, iterated along the way, but I'm pretty pleased with where we are here 18 months in.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that, you guys were obviously very ahead of the curve on is looking at the NFT as that technology, again, to your point, tied to that real world asset, which irrespective of the NFT and, how one uses it, at the end of the day, the value is derived from the underlying derivative asset, right? You can, if you have an NFT tied to a Mickey Mantle card, and you want to take physical possession of that Mickey Mantle rookie card instead of in a vault, you can essentially redeem or burn the NFT and get sent in the mail, FedEx, that Mickey Mantle card. And I've done that, not with Mickey Mantle, unfortunately, but with a host of other things through Blockpacks. And I think this is a theme. As you mentioned, NFL all day. We've seen Top Shot. We've seen Candy Digital now, and those have been popular, but have also waned because they're, at the end of the day, I think, not tied. It's tough for people to wrap their head around, right? Because there's unlimited supply. It's not tied to anything. You don't own the IP.
Yeah, I think I really want to be. I appreciate those businesses, and I want them to be wildly successful. But I do think it's important for the market to understand differences in what those products are and what true self-custody ownership of a digital asset is. And for those that may be familiar with the space as far as NFTs go, and there's really two kind of, I would say, the most mainstream collections that maybe folks have heard about. One would be the CryptoPunk collection. The other would be the Bored Ape Yacht Club collection. Both those have gotten some run in mainstream circles. And the Bored Apes are the ones that, NFTs are just, people are paying these insane prices for these monkey pictures or whatever. But what they don't necessarily understand with that view is all of the utility that kind of gets packed underneath that. Access to a group that is, there's been some really interesting businesses built out of that Bored Ape Yacht Club. They have a big music festival every year. They have their own token that they're building in their own metaverse. There's a lot to unpack there. And that digital ownership of those apes and those CryptoPunks is very different than the digital ownership we see inside NBA Top Shot. And you can't, you have to stay inside their ecosystem with those assets. Whereas, again, not my coins, or not my keys, not my coins, meaning if you don't hold it in your wallet, is it truly yours? Those type of digital collectibles, I think, are different. So I just want to make sure that we kind of level set and understand, and just don't conflate this for viewers, because I do think there's a level of collectability on the digital side that truly self-custody assets have an advantage over things like Top Shot and NFL All Day. Now, bring that back to what you were saying, the physical side with what we're doing. Certainly when we use the tech and underpin, instead of the apes underpinning a social club and underpinning access to a music festival, we underpin it with a Mickey Mantle card. Mm-hmm. Same thing, like the digital asset. Some digital assets are just digital assets, and that's all they are. They're just collectibles. Some have utility, and that's what we are with the vault tokens and the things you're talking about. The utility of that NFT is simply the fact that it's redeemable for that physical card. And then a lot of times you'll see things that kind of there's a bit of a hybrid there. But I think all of that is just different applications of the technology. I mean, I love sports cards. I love memorabilia. I love comics. I love video games. I mean, it's all very real. Like this, that's in my DNA. It's who I am. But I also really do believe very strongly in purely digital collecting. I mean, I own CryptoPunks, and I'm very bullish on them. And I want to create true digital collectibles as well. So I think once people fully understand how the technology works, how the ownership works, that this is truly something that's theirs, when they understand the immutability of it, self-custody of it, it's a powerful thing. And so those physical assets being underpinning those NFTs as a gateway for people has been super powerful for us. And we've seen people then go off and explore true digital art, true digital collectibles, and those sort of things. And that's exactly what we want to do. I want people to come and experience the same types of things that I've experienced in my collecting. And it's hard to grasp digital ownership until you own true digital assets, and you won't grasp it. You may have fun. You may have an enjoyable experience in a walled garden. Mm-hmm. You may have a ton of fun. You may even make money in a walled garden, but you're not going to truly feel it until it's under your keys, in your wallet. It's yours. No one can take it away. That's when you really that's when you really get red pilled and begin to really understand the power of this technology.
Yeah, I think there's a number of avenues that you can go down there, and I think you bring up an important point when it pertains to, not just actually owning the asset, and that can mean also control over, what derivative assets there could be or how unique it truly is. But I think the other important point that you bring up, and it is very relevant to Yuga Labs, is the actual utility that comes with what you own, and how applicable or usable that utility is, what IP may or may not be involved. And, I think this is a trend that is, largely going to become more and more mainstream. Like whenever I have, NFT conversations with, other parents at my kid's school, or my parents, or just people who aren't very involved, I kind of always step back and just say, well, look, an NFT is just a contract. It's just a technology. It's ultimately about like what's underlying that, what it gives you the rights to. And I think that's really important, because we have seen in the news, even like Candy Digital, right? They have licenses with the MLB and NASCAR and others, but at the end of the day, Fanatics sold their stake in it, which I think is not a very bullish sign until you listen to what they actually say, is that they see the technology having a really pertinent place in collecting down the road as it ties to real world assets or real world experiences or something truly unique.
Yeah, I'm bullish on the idea of NFTs as it relates to ties to physical assets. And clearly we were one of the very first to do it. We were the very first ones to put big time sports cards on the blockchain and tokenize them. So I'm definitely in on that. And when I read Ruben's comments, Ruben, CEO of Fanatics, when they exited the Candy investment, and he said some things that I don't agree with. I do believe in, again, this idea of you don't have to have a physical tied to something for it to be inherently collectible. Again, it's just that Candy's platform, it's again, being a walled garden, and the product is self-contained. It is what it is. It's I don't own any Candy assets. Don't own any Top Shots. I don't own any NFL All Day. And part of that is just because of it doesn't fit with my ethos of decentralization and not my keys, not my coins, right? So I'm a bit of a maxi when it comes to that, but I don't fault people who want to have those more walled off experiences. And I appreciate what those walled off experiences do to help bring people into the space. They're just not for me. But I think what we're going to see here is, if you look at the way technology evolves, there's a famous quote from Henry Ford. If I would have asked people what type of car they wanted, they would have said they wanted a faster horse.
Faster horse, yeah.
Bigger horse. I can't remember the exact quote, but
faster horse.
That's really kind of where we are, because so few people have truly touched and felt this technology. Let me just give you kind of one example of where I think something that's just super obvious to me, and maybe it's something that listeners can relate to a little bit easier. When you think about collectability, let's talk about the Pokemon franchise. Forget whether or not you play it, you probably have heard of it. Pikachu, the big math guy. People know who he is. A lot of people know who Charizard is. He's kind of the big bad dragon. One of the amazing things about that is that kids can do two things. They can play the game, and adults. They play the game and they can collect the characters. And that's kind of the way the process works. And then when you get a character that's worth a lot of money from a collectability standpoint, what do we do with it? Send it to PSA. We get it put in a slab. It now becomes a collectible, and you don't play with it in the game anymore. And the utility that it then has is really its collectability and the ability to set it on a shelf, put it in a case, be proud of it. And that's cool. And I do that. I participate in that. You may participate in that. And I enjoy that. One of the things that's going to happen with NFTs is we don't have to worry about things like damage, decay, things that would plague a 1999 Charizard card to where I want to pull it out of circulation and not play with it. Just the opposite. When you have that higher end asset, part of you being able to show it off and flex it, which is a part of collecting. I mean, I got my stuff on a shelf here. Why? So people can see it. And my friends come over, I pull stuff out of cases. If I don't have it locked up in the bank vault, I show them pictures of the stuff I do have in the bank vault. Showing off your collection is part of collecting. And anybody that says it's not I think they're kind of crazy because that's what I've never met a collector that doesn't want to show off their collection.
Absolutely.
Pride in it, right? And when you with NFTs and with what's coming with gaming, the ability to show your collection off while you use it is going to be an incredibly powerful force that I think can accrete value into the higher end assets that we've never seen before. Meaning, if Pokemon, instead of being physical cards and printed on a half a penny worth of cardboard, if they were printed on an NFT that was a few dollars worth of gas to create it, it actually may cost more to produce the digital card than it did to produce the physical one. At that point, that asset is easier to show off. It's easier to social signal with. It's easier to play in the game with, and it stays alive in the game. I saw this week where someone had their account turned off on one of the major gaming platforms. I don't remember exactly which one it was, but the article said they had $5 million worth of skins for that game in their account when it got shut off. Now, I don't know what they did to piss the developer off, but got their account shut off, lost $5 million worth of skins. Those aren't NFTs. They're not transferable. Whoever that is, just for whatever reason, I don't know if they were a big streamer and they were just buying the skins to push their Twitch stream up. I'm not sure how they came to have $5 million of non-transferable skins in a video game, but they did. And they lost them all when the account got shut off. And when you see that type of thing and realize over here on the other side with NFTs, if those had been self-custodied NFTs, the developer could have maybe denied them access to the game because the game, that's different. That still runs on their servers. Those assets were theirs. They couldn't have taken those assets away. And that's a very big part of what NFTs can bring. And when people realize that, oh, if I misstep and my account gets shut off or heaven forbid, the game goes out of business.
Yeah.
Think about collectability and how sometimes things going out of business actually add to collectability. When the Jackie Robinson Leaf card was produced, Leaf goes out of business, that card goes up in value. Leaf, the old Leaf didn't exist anymore. The brand got bought out of, Brian Gray bought it out of bankruptcy and brought it back to life, but it went out of business. And that added to the collectability of the Leaf card in the era where Topps was booming. That Leaf card, because Leaf didn't exist anymore, added more collectability. You could have a situation where somebody develops a game, people get assets in the game goes defunct, and then you port that into a bigger and better game, and it becomes more collectible because you have the stuff from that OG game that died, that cult game, and there's only 500 of those guns or those skins. There's so many collector theses. I'm just making that up off the dome, but you could just see ways that with NFTs and the portability across these platforms, and we look at what happens in physical, when gaming comes out and is a big thing, I absolutely am going to be looking for early gaming assets with rarity. Yep. And I think the way that a Pokemon card became collectible, if you pick the winners in that space, fast forward 20, 30 years, those early digital collectibles that come out of Web3 games, man, I think the sky's the limit on them because global, instant liquidity, all the things we like about crypto combined with that connection that gaming can create. I just think Pokemon in Web3, fast forward 20 years, would have been just bigger than it is today. Because now you're still, instead of me having my Charizard locked up at the bank down the road, it's in my wallet and I can still play the game with it and show it off every single time I play the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's really powerful. And I think people, once they fully grasp all that, it's going to be a bit of a red pilling, and I think we have a whole nother wave coming. I think it'll be led primarily by gaming.
I think you bring up a few what should be kind of Eureka moments, or what are the kind of classic Eureka moments. So with regard to fanatics, and I don't want to belabor the point too much, but I completely agree with you. I don't think that it's tied to physical or bust, right? I think I think tied to utility or bust. Like there has to be some sort of utility or benefit, even if that utility is a widely accepted narrative, like in the case of art or something like that. Because ultimately people who buy art because they think it's going to go up in value, 99.9%, I don't know the exact number, but I'd imagine it's that high.
Most
losing money
with that for sure.
Unless you buy the next Picasso, and Picasso is valuable because there's a widely accepted narrative, subjective or objective, that it's incredibly valuable and rare art. And there will be NFT projects that are purely art based on that. I don't even think necessarily Bored Apes falls in that category, because I think you are paying for membership, right? It would be like any social club or country club membership,
Yep.
where there are benefits to holding that, and that PFP of that ape is your key to get in, and it's just extremely exclusive. And there are other examples of that, of course. I think you're exactly right with the self-custody. I've never really thought of it that way, but something like Candy or Top Shot, again, and I think they were unique, and they obviously led up to a lot of interest, but they're not true NFTs.
We get into splitting hairs. Somebody would, someone from their biz dev team would certainly say, yeah, they're real NFTs. We mint them to the blockchain. And again, I'm not, please, if anybody from those companies is listening, I appreciate what you guys are doing. I think it's a great onboard. I just want to make sure we just understand the differences. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that what they're doing is bad, wrong, or indifferent. I'm just saying that it's a different value proposition in my mind. But yep. I do believe that when people say, think about what is the main argument that people say when they say, I don't want that. Oh, I right click, I saved your JPEG. I now own it. I can't touch it. That's something that I hear people say, I can't touch it. And you're right. You can't touch a digital item, but self-custody under your own keys it's so close to that it has other benefits that touching doesn't provide. The things I've already I won't rehash all the things I just said about how you could show it, flex it, use it, all that. Mm-hmm. It's not the same, but it's really close, and it has benefits. And the only benefit it loses is literally that tactile physical touch. That's it. Everything else is there. True ownership, true provenance. Every person that's ever owned it. We don't know that. I guess they know it, but I don't think that I don't know if they expose that to their users. I will admit I'm not a user of their system. So I don't want to get out over my skis talking about their businesses, but I know with self-custody assets, I know every step they make along the way. I know who's owned them. I know its provenance. I know that it can't be counterfeited. It's impossible to counterfeit. Somebody can fake something, and you could buy the wrong one to fake if you're not paying attention. That can happen. But all you have to do is look at the blockchain. Am I buying the real NFT from the real contract? You should never buy a Bored Ape and buy the wrong ape. Like, that should never, ever, ever happen. It can't be counterfeited. All you have to do is verify that it's the right one on the blockchain. And so there's just self-custody does bring you to a level of pride in ownership of the assets. You feel it. You feel ownership in self-custody. I don't feel any different when I woke up today. I don't feel any different in my level of ownership over my Bored Apes than I do over my Mickey Mouse.
Sure.
That's the same in my brain. And I think when other people truly experience that, it would feel the same to them too. I don't believe feels the same when you have to log in with your email address into a third-party platform to see an asset that you own. That I don't think that conjures up the same feeling I don't think you wake up feeling like that's the same as your Mickey Mantle card. I just don't.
It's mechanically very different. I have used those platforms, and I'm not an active user anymore. Really don't. And one of the major reasons is, the advantage of blockchain as a technology is it increases the velocity of assets, right? You can take an asset and you can, repurpose as a collateral. You can trade it. You can transfer it. You can fractionalize it. You can do, all these things that you couldn't do 5 years ago with a illiquid asset. Now, some of these platforms that we're talking about, they don't solve for that. I can't take my assets and put them on a MetaMask wallet. I can't sell them privately. I can't transfer them. I can't trade them. I can't use them as collateral. It's within a singular system. The blockchain there is totally unnecessary. You could replicate it using a database, right, a SQL database. And to me, that just doesn't solve for anything. But getting away from that, because I don't think either of us want to spend too much time talking about that model. I think that one thing I never thought of that you brought up was, and probably because I'm not historically a Pokemon or trading card game player, but you're exactly right. You see Logan Paul and these people with these $1 million Pokemon cards, but ultimately they're supposed to be played. So there's kind of a rub, the more valuable something is, the less you want to damage it. So you can't even use it to play it. But in a metaverse type ecosystem, you actually can solve for that. So you can still have the value of the collectible and its rarity, have all the advantages of the blockchain, actually have the advantages of playing people in a community all over the world with different access points. There's a lot there. And I think some of the early blockchain games, maybe were more hype than substance and were just early, like in a lot of things. But yeah, I mean, so how do you view the, TCG side of Metaverse evolving over time? And I know this is something that you guys at Blockpacks are very active in.
Yeah, so I think that that's going to be one that, so I think a lot of people, we all inherently, human beings like to play games. And I would say that that is something that's really from tic-tac-toe to, the level of complexity. Like there's a stop where everyone kind of goes, where it's like, no, I don't want to do that. It's too complicated. Or some people want mass complication. But we can look at the success of gaming as a whole and just see how many people play games. And I think if you can construct, and this is what we're going to try to set out to do, we're going to try to set out to construct a trading card game framework where you can play it very casually and have fun. It's real easy to pick up. You can pick up the rules in 30 seconds, and then you can play the game. And then we can add layers of complexity that you can choose as a player to either add or not. And I am real bullish on that model, because one of the big things when people think about the metaverse, a lot of people imagine everybody putting on VR headsets and doing stuff. And that's not really what I believe. For me, I believe when the metaverse is when you can have interactions with people around the world, similar to what those actions would react, those interactions would be in real life. Instead of typing, we're talking. We don't necessarily have to see each other in a physical form. We don't have to have on VR goggles, but the ability to be able to walk around in a virtual room, and as you move from one side of the room to the other, your conversations move with you. You can, when you're on this side of the room, you're talking to the people on that side. When you move to the other side, you're talking to the people on the other side. That's the type of spatial virtual world where I think things start really becoming immersive. And I can absolutely see in the metaverse where we come in, and you think about right now, if I wanted to play any type of game, whether it's a poker game, you could play poker online. Okay, I get it. You can sit there in a flat, graphical interface. You can play the game. That's not the same as sitting across and talking to someone and playing with them. And the same thing with a trading card game. When you go to your local hobby shop and you have that interaction across a table, it's very different than playing that game in a flat web browser online. The metaverse is going to allow us to get closer to those human-to-human interaction experiences. And that's why I think TCGs specifically for the masses, once you find a theme you like, you may be a sports guy. So the TCG you may most enjoy is a sports themed one. Somebody else may be more of a fantastical one with little monsters and creatures. It's just the other one may be superheroes, whatever people are into. But what TCG will allow us to do is have that casual experience where it's social, in that we're sitting there playing the game against each other the same way you would across a table, with a model that we've seen in the real world just explode and be incredibly powerful. And I just think that in the metaverse, it's so obvious. That one just hits me like a load of bricks. Like there are going to be massive winners that adopt that technology in its native form of ownership, of spatial audio, of utilizing the virtual world to create something that is akin to that real life experience. And when I can bring that in and play with my friend in California in a much more seamless way than us playing Words with Friends back and forth on a phone, which I don't do, but I can sit here and we can, between turns, man, did you see what Patrick Mahomes did yesterday? That was pretty crazy. And we're having that conversation. That adds different elements, and the game becomes part of our social interaction. That's where some things are going to get super powerful. And then you have the other side of gaming, the AAA side, where people get together and play Fortnite to run and beat something. Kids are doing a lot of that already. Like that I don't know that the metaverse per se is bringing a whole lot new to the table. I'm not saying it's not. That's not my bailiwick. I'm not a AAA developer. I'm sure they have amazing ideas, but a lot of that already happens. But what doesn't happen is what I just described. That's not here yet. And it's something that I think is, for every one person that can play Fortnite at a high level, there are 10,000 people that can play a card game, poker. blackjack, a purpose-made game. And I think that's a huge opportunity for, I think Web3 TCG can dwarf what physical TCG has ever been, simply because of the accessibility, the velocity, the ownership that the technology provides. It's for sure a space that I'm very bullish on. And then I think, there's, again, TCG doesn't mean that it has to just be little monsters. It could be sports themed. It could be these different things. And so it's definitely an area that we want to explore. We want to develop a core framework, a rule set. We actually already have that is developed. And that rule set will be the framework that we build all of our games on. So if you know how to play our sports game, you know how to play our monster game, you know how to play our superhero game. And from there, we can add specialized complexities in each of those games to kind of let you kind of choose your own adventure, so to speak, and what it is that you want to do, how you want to play, what you want to collect. And it's there's some other aspects of this that I think that I'm super bullish on. One of the things being the ability to let other people share your collection and utilize utility from your collection. One of the things that I can't share my 1999 Charizard with you. It's in the bank vault. It's an asset. There's no way I can really share that. I mean, we could share ownership of it. There's no way I could say, hey, Peter, use the benefit of this card today to play in a game, and let's split the prize if you win in this big Pokemon tournament. Guess what you do in Web3? You can do exactly that. So someone who's a high-end collector can collect at the highest level. And a lot of times the people that are rich in money, that can afford to collect the highest end stuff, they're very poor in time. And the people that are the richest in time tend to be a little more poor in money. This gives an opportunity for the big high-end collector to say, oh, there's a tournament over there, and you have to have these high-end TCG cards. They're cards that I'm paying tens of thousands of dollars for. I'm not really good enough to play in that tournament anyway. I'm just a collector. I can designate a player, let a player use my deck, let them go take it and play with it. And if they win, we split the prize. And the deck is still mine. I'm still the collector. They didn't damage it. They didn't crease a corner. That's Web3 only. You can't do that in the real world. So that's just one more little novel use of that. And so think about how exciting that becomes for me as a collector now. I can take my collection, and even though I may not want to go or be good enough to go play in a high level tournament, I can kind of choose my champion to take my deck that I've built. They can go play with it because they can't afford that same deck. And now I have skin in that game because I'm pulling for them really hard. I'm like a team owner. And so there's just so many things that this technology can allow us to do. And we're going to lean into all of those concepts. And it is something that we definitely want to be one of the ones at the forefront of it. And I know that the big companies, they're going to fast copy everything that works. That is their business model, fast copy.
Sure.
When they sit back, they wait, oh, that worked, we're going to fast copy it. And so we have some moats that we're going to build around our business to try to help protect it. Try to create our own economy within our ecosystem. That's a big moat that we want to put around our business, so that when we hit our home runs, that it's harder for the others to fast copy it.
There's so much there. I say that a lot with guests, but there's truly, I mean, from the kind of team ownership concept of TCG, because I think you're exactly right. I'm not, I'm a collector at heart. I collect, different things, but I'm not, going to be a TCG player. I've just never done it. I don't know how to do it. I probably don't have time to do it, but to basically get further utility on the assets that I collect, or an annuity stream of some sort, or to be able to recognize, who's a good player, and almost like, the old model of, seeding someone for poker tournaments, right? Because they can't pay the entry fee. In this case, it's they don't have the deck or the actual assets required to play.
That's the perfect comparison. Yes.
That's fascinating. You're right. So what solves for this is transferable ownership, is blockchain, is rule based. If you can describe it in math, then you can make it a reality. And that didn't exist before. And I think Metaverse, and you bring up some, really thought-provoking points on Metaverse, because I think when most people think of it, they do think about, all right, I'm going to put on my VR goggles, I'm going to go, and even, Oculus is pretty cool. Like you can watch an NBA game and feel like you're courtside, and you can turn around, there's an avatar next to you, and it's all creepy, but it's kind of cool too if you can watch a game with your friends and stuff. But what you combine, blockchain with that, which I think solves for the illiquidity of assets over space and time, right? You can make them transferable anywhere in the world instantaneously, totally trustless, totally decentralized. And you combine that with a metaverse, which essentially looks to replicate reality, solve for human interaction, and you combine the ownership aspect of that in goods and experiences. It takes it to a very different level where I think, TCG is an obvious one. And I'm sure there's many, many other things you're not even thinking of that I know like the Nikes of the world are spending a lot of time on. But it definitely changes, I think, the thought process of what people need to consider when they think about what Metaverse actually is and represents.
Yeah, one of the things that I have younger founders that'll reach out to me, and I try to give them time where I'm super busy, but I do try when a young founder reaches out and wants some advice, I try to at least carve out a little bit of time for them. And one of the big things that I tell them in this space particularly is I say, just make sure that what you're doing truly takes advantage of the technology. Be novel with the technology. Don't just repurpose something that's already done and reskin it and say that it's now Web3. You look at our business, and I won't try to go back in this, but I would like to think if you take everything that we have done and given to the outside world, it is not, some component of it is not possible without the tech. Like we try to create new things that the tech makes possible. The Blockpacks RAS, which is our pack ripping gamified experience to win those cards, we used old world sweepstakes law to create a new age pack ripping experience and transferability and ownership that is only possible with Web3. You could maybe run that game in a scenario where you had everyone in one room in the physical world. It would be impossible to run that game where people are in different places. You would literally have to mail, like, how do you do it? Like how could you have the RAS without Web3? Other than if you had maybe a group of people in the same room, maybe you could do it that way. And so that's a very novel use of the tech. Everything that we have coming, we're trying to make sure that every time we do have a novel use of the tech. So that's what I tell young founders. I'm like, if your idea is to just take something and reskin it, I don't think you're going to really find a great long-term viable business. You may be able to chase the latest meta, the latest thing that's hot, you may be able to make some money in the short term, but is it real to build a real business and something that's long-term sustainable? You have to build with the tech in mind of how Web3, I call it being Web3 native. Every product you release has to be a Web3 native product. And we challenge ourselves to that all the time. And we've had good ideas that we haven't executed because they weren't Web3 native. They were probably pretty good ideas. They probably could have done okay for the short term, but then they're just what's there long term when you haven't really adopted the tech. Like if we already have that business, we don't need it Web3.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And look, the thing I just find so I don't know if it's reassuring or impressive about you and the team, what you guys are doing at Blockpacks is just, you could tell there's a lot of thought behind everything that you build. That, okay, does this leverage the technology? Is there a true kind of benefit utility? Like, does this make sense for all sides, and is it sustainable? And that's not something that is frankly often done with startups. So you do see the constant iteration, and you're exactly right with the RAS. Like there's no way to replicate that in any other fashion. Like, yeah, maybe if everyone was in a room and like handing out like pieces of paper or something, but I mean, just, for the audience, I'll try to give a very, quick description, and to the extent that anyone's not familiar with Blockpacks, like, we'll have the website in the notes, and check out the Discord, because it's truly incredible. But it's a sweepstakes, right? And there's 2048 entries, which are all NFTs, tokens, for a prize, right? And it could be an NFT, it could be in this one that's going on right now, there's a pudgy penguin. I wanted the pudgy penguin. But what you can do and what NFTs allow for is transferability, right? You can buy and sell entries on OpenSea, increasing your odds of getting it, or you can trade with other members of the community, get equivalent value, and really stack in something you're going for, because every time horizon, essentially those outstanding RAS tokens are cut in half. So instead of if you have one Pudgy Penguin token, you have a 1 in 2048 chance of winning. Next, you have a 1 in 1024, 1 in 512, and so on and so forth. Yeah, 256. And I went and I was kind of collected them, stacked them up, had a 12.5, 15% chance depending on how many get eliminated, and someone else was going for it, and last night they made me an offer, and we figured out the equivalent value, and they gave me an instant win and some ETH and some others, and it was just like, where in a sweepstakes can you actually monetize along the way? It would be like if you had you were sitting on futures for the Eagles to win the Super Bowl, and I'm like, I don't really want to sit on this coin flip. I would sell it for a 90% or 80% discount or whatever, right? So that's what Web3 allows for, and it creates trust, it creates a community, and then you have going back full circle to the Yuga Labs, you have what about entrance into this community? How valuable is it? What kind of other relationships or ancillary benefits can you derive from this community? And it's very sustainable, right? And
just one thing I'd add for any lawyers in the room: the way you get those entries is you buy collectibles from us, and we reward you with those entries. And there's literally a mail-in that you can get if you don't want to buy the collectibles to get the free entries. You can mail in. It is a sweepstakes. It's bonded in New York and Florida, been that way since the very beginning. And then once we put the sweepstakes entries out, they're decentralized. They're self-custody. I don't hold them in a database anymore. I can't stop Peter from transferring his sweepstakes entry if I want to. I can't, because it's his keys, and we have no part in that. Like we don't take you hear about people, there's a voluntary royalty scheme that you can put on NFTs. We don't have any royalty on that. Nothing. It's freely transferred between those that own them. It's no different than if Coca-Cola had a promotion under their bottle caps, and you bought a Coca-Cola and you screw it off and it says, congratulations, you got this entry, and you want to sell it to someone walking down the sidewalk, it is your bottle cap. And when Peter gets his RAS entries, they are his. He can do what he wants with them. I can't stop him if I want to. The way he got it was through an old world sweepstakes that's been around for decades, centuries. I don't know when the sweepstakes laws that are on the books now were made, but it's a novel use of the technology that enables him to take those and do what he wants to do with them. They're his. They're under his keys. They're his coins, so to speak. They're not coins, but they're his. And he can do what he wants. And that's what he's describing there. But that's how we took the old world idea of sweepstakes, wrapped it with Web3 in a novel way that couldn't exist in the outside world, and bam, you got the Blockpacks RAS, and people obviously love it. I mean, it's a game that has a very passionate following.
Yeah, and there's game theory involved. It's fun, so it's really cool. Yeah, anyone who hasn't checked it out, I would could not recommend it personally more highly, just because it's a great time. And then in terms of I want to go back to something that I wrote down earlier when you were talking about Fortnite, right? I think there are aspects of Fortnite and some of these games where obviously people are paying money and they're buying avatars and weapons and parachutes and different things like that. But where it differs is, to your point, like there's nothing you can do with that. Like those, you don't have custody of those assets. If I wanted to sell say I was a Fortnite player and I put thousands of dollars into buying all this stuff.
That's the example I said earlier. The guy that lost his $5 million skins. I don't think it was Fortnite, but yeah, exact same thing.
There's nothing you can do with them. And so I had an episode on earlier, it might've been late last year, with someone who's very involved in the gaming space in NFTs. And we talked a lot about, NBA 2K is a great example, right? Like you can actually spend money and you buy, I got like the old 90s Knicks on an NBA 2K team that I, play, and they have an internal marketplace. Like I can sell them, but I can't sell them for ETH, and is there an advantage? And I think a lot of the gaming companies now are wrestling with that. Like, well, why would I do that? Because I can have it all internally? Why would I allow it to be transferable? But I think, ultimately that's probably where the world is going. I just don't know how long it's going to take.
They have to be fearing major disruption. The biggest, they have moats. I mean, you have EA, they have the Madden license, and they have the NFL, and they hell of a moat, right? And so as long as they keep that license, you can't get the real players in a game. Makes it hard for an NFT participant to come along and copy Madden because they don't have the real players, and people are going to want that. But if you don't have something that is a really strong moat like that, Fortnite's moat is their own brand. It's what they've built. But can someone else build their own first-person shooter and build their own franchise? Yes. I think the sports games are a little bit more insulated because of the licensing. But I think all of the other games where they're built on their own franchise, if the right company, the right people get a hold of it, because it takes a lot to build a AAA game. The moat is the budget it takes to build the daggum thing.
Sure.
But if the right company comes in and says, we're going to disrupt this, we're going to be the first, we're going to release Fortnite fully decentralized, where we're not going to fear some of these things that these other incumbents are fearing. We're going to use this as our competitive advantage. If I was the producer of one of those games, I would probably be losing a little bit of sleep at night. Probably sleep a little bit easier if I'm EA and I got my licenses. And that forces people into the gray market. I'll admit, Madden is a game that my son and I, when he came through his teenage years, we played it. I played it with him a lot because it gave me something to do, spend a little bit more time with my son. I've bought some Muck coin on the gray market.
Sure.
So that I could get the better player in the game. It forces you into this gray market thing, and you're like, all right, I'm going to send this guy some PayPal on this website. I hope he's going to really buy this. And then you put your cheap card up for auction, and they buy it for like a lot more than it's worth. And like, I hope he's going to do that, but the guy could have rugged me and ran away with my money. But I mean, it forces people into that gray market, and a lot of people still find a way. But with NFTs, you don't have to do that. You can do it all above board, which is, I think, would be better. But again, I think that the companies that have those big licensing deals, they're a little bit more insulated. But if I was Fortnite, if I was the Halo franchise or Grand Theft Auto franchise, or these ones where it's a brand you've built, but someone else could build a similar one, and if they give consumers something that you're not giving them, they could take a lot of market share from you in a hurry. If I was in their shoes, I'd be more worried, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I understand the desire to protect, a cash cow and protect profits, but at the end of the day, there's other ways of also generating income, right? Transaction fees is a big one, or I would think primary volumes would increase, because I know if I can buy, 1993 John Starks, but maybe not have him miss 13 3-pointers in the finals, and I can actually turn around and sell that, and it's not just once I buy it, it's done, or I could do something with it. Like, yep. I'm probably more prone to spending money on that game than I would be otherwise.
I think a big challenge. So let's look at it for just a second. If we were going to do Web3 Madden, like, what is the big problem you're going to run into all of a sudden? You do the first year of it, it's going to crush it. You're going to release the Joe Montana Legend card and in Ultimate Team, and people are going to buy that. That card's going to go for obscene amounts of money. They'll be able to make obscene amounts of money to put them in the market, and then the price of them is going to go up through the roof because it's the first ever truly collectible Madden Legend for Joe Montana. Now you get to year two. You could release the Peyton Manning or the Steve Young, but you've kind of shot your shot on that Joe Montana. It doesn't mean you can't ever do anything with it again, but with the big advantage that they have right now, if I'm sitting in the room and I'm trying to say, like, how do we pivot to a Web3 where we let people keep ownership of these? The biggest advantage they have is they reset the deck every year, and that's a huge moneymaker for them. Like, your cards stay alive within the season that you're in. And then they may have, like, I feel like there are maybe a couple things, like some little things that can port from one to the next, and that just may be like a little bone they throw you. But for the most part, it resets every year. That's a huge advantage for them as the game maker, because they have the full suite of everything available in the next release. It's almost like the other stuff, that supply is in the past, right? Because everybody's going to play everybody's going to migrate to the new version of the game, and that supply that they created, all that supply is really de facto burned because it's stuck in that old game. Whereas if you let it come forward year after year, fast forward 10 years, you have all of the supply that you created from season 1 is now existent in season 10. And then you, the game developer, have to continue to produce new things that people pay money for so that you can continue to sell and make your money. That's the big challenge that I think that they're probably staring down, and why they don't want those assets to be portable year over year. Right? That's what with their model. Like, so I feel like you have to disrupt the whole model somehow. And that would be the big challenge. I'll just tell you, like, okay, so I've told you we want to build TCGs, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I love about TCGs is I love their inherent collectability when a TCG card is maybe not the best card to play in the game anymore. And why does that happen? It happens through a booster pack model. So if you have a card that comes into being and it's an amazing card for some period of time, and then maybe a booster pack and some change to the deck dynamic lowers the strength of that card still stays very collectible into the future. The character stays collectible, and people want that connection to those earlier assets. Maybe that happens in Madden, meaning maybe they could release the John Elway legend, and maybe there's a way to port it forward and have it have some effect in the new game, but not necessarily be its full-on magical John Elway, Joe Montana gives you all the power, because they have to monetize the new year. Maybe there's some ways that they can do that. Like in a TCG, that's a power dynamic that model's done. Like Pokemon, Wizards of the Coast has done that with Pokemon, and Konami's done it with Yu-Gi-Oh! We've seen Magic, Wizards do it with Magic. We understand how that model works, whereas the supply doesn't harm the game. It makes the game better. I struggle to see how you do that in Madden, I think.
Well, so I actually think it's probably pretty easy. Like, okay, what's the difference between NBA 2K and NBA 2K, or NBA 2K22 and NBA 23? One has Paulo Banchero, one doesn't, right? So what do you sell? Instead of charging $60 for the game, you charge $15 for the roster upgrades, right? You got Jalen Brunson on the Knicks instead of the Mavericks, right? If you do talking about John Elway or players who are retired, maybe it's in the new uniforms or new jerseys, or like Fortnite outfits or things like that.
Wearables would be a good way. Like that
new Nike shoes.
That way, it doesn't increase the supply. So there's different. That's what I'm saying, is that you have to kind of think. You have to turn your model upside down, because right now the model is very clearly you just sell new cards. Like they release Bo Jackson every year, and he's a bad dude and he runs over everybody. Like, and he comes out around Christmas or whatever, and you want the Bo Jackson. Like but once you have the Bo Jackson in a NFT and you want to play the subsequent year, you've already got your Bo Jackson. So then what? Right?
It's like the flexing, right?
You have to change it to make it something different, I think.
Yeah, but it's the flexing too. Like, okay, you have the Bo Jackson,
and maybe the shoes just make him a little more powerful. Maybe it is the TCG model. Maybe the 2023 shoes on the legendary Bo Jackson give him that extra advantage that make him better than if you didn't have those shoes. And maybe that model works great for them. I'm sure there's smart people trying to figure that out on AAA side, some of these games. And I feel like we have a pretty good grasp on it with what I want to do TCG wise. And one of the things is I think I have a nice blueprint for developing your power structure and collectability structure on top of that. So like, how do you make it both playable, collectible? And again, I think our holy grail is going to be the way we make it where collectors can become team owners. I love that concept. It's going to get copied. If we're
I love that.
And that's why we have to find other moats to protect it. Because if it works, it's going to get copied really quickly.
So, I mean, we could talk for another hour, probably easy. But one thing I want to make sure that we touch upon, because it is slightly different than everything else, but I think speaks to the fact. I mean, like, you got a team, you've got really, you got developers, you got some outstanding talent there, and one of the incredibly impressive things you guys did involve the merge and the switch from ETH proof of work to proof of stake, and you guys actually filled the last block and minted it as an NFT project, which I'm sure a lot of people are now familiar with, called the Lost Miners, which is really clever. And as we talked about there, I think that is a something that will exist into perpetuity, and it has a extremely powerful narrative about it. So, you know, like, how did you even, where did that idea come from to think to do it? And, you know, how do you look at that project?
So I think when I look at different ways that we can create digital collectible adventures for people, one of the ways is tying them to the physical cards. We talked about that. You can license things. That's a way. You can build your own franchise values. We talked about that. That's what TCGs would be. The other is that you kind of have these moments where you can do something that is it's collectible because of that moment that it's in. An example might be if somebody did something really specific around Tom Brady's retirement, nailed the timing on it. It was right there at that moment in time. That would be something where, yeah, you got some licensing wrapped up in it too, but it's really that moment in time that would make it. I saw where somebody was selling a jar of the sand on eBay and it was up to like $100,000 where he stood on the beach, which is clearly not real, but not real bids anyway. My son showed me that. He's like, I can't believe this. I was like, son, there's no way that somebody's paying that. You could go get your own sand from that same spot. But anyway, the Ethereum merge was going to be, I as being someone who follows the tech, I knew the significance of it. The mining age, I think most people understand what mining is. People have heard about mining Bitcoin. That's where, and mining Ethereum or Ether before that. Essentially what that is it's thousands and thousands of computers trying to solve a complex computer problem to earn some of the cryptocurrency. And it's what makes the blockchain decentralized and allows the blockchain to work. That was very important to the decentralization of the early chain, but it has a terrible environmental narrative. It also has a terrible tokenomics effect because all the people that are paying to mine the token, when they get the token, they have to sell it to pay their operations. So it's got this immediate sell pressure, inflation of the token supply, immediate sell pressure from the miners. The more activity you need, the more the miners need to spend more energy. They got to pay bigger electric bills. They got to sell more of the token. So it's just overall, yes, it's very good for decentralization. It's bad for the environment, and it's bad for your tokenomics. And knowing that the Ethereum Foundation was going to switch to a proof of stake model, which basically allows you, instead of settling those blocks with computer power, you settle them by holding a certain amount of the token in a stake. And if you do something wrong, the community as a whole can vote to take away your token. So what they did is they changed it to where there's a financial penalty for doing something wrong. And then your rewards are greatly reduced because you don't have all that energy consumption. It's a lot cheaper to do proof of stake. So the amount of token that you need to receive is very low. It greatly reduced the emissions of the token, made the tokenomics of Ether a lot better, and I think will eventually lead to it flipping market cap of Bitcoin. The Bitcoin maxis, I can feel them coming with their pitchforks and their fire when I say that, but I believe it. But it also changed the narrative to an environmentally friendly narrative. So I knew it was going to be this huge moment, and it's one that we've been waiting for years, right? And so I don't feel like it took a rocket science degree to say, hey, somebody's going to make the last ever NFT collection that'll ever be mined. That's going to happen. Somebody will mine the very last one. And then we said, why not us? So we sat around and we began planning it. And what we had to do is we had to predict when the switch would happen, because it wasn't set to happen at a set time. It wasn't set to happen at a set block on the blockchain. It was set to happen when the past difficulty of all of those computer problems, those mining hashes, when they all reached a certain level referred to as a difficulty bomb, it would cause the chain to flip over and merge with a chain that was running side by side with it under proof of stake. They would merge together and then it would take off their forward under proof of stake. So we had to predict that. And then we had to fire our, what's called, when you create a collection, an NFT collection, you have to put what's called a smart contract on the blockchain. That's what tells the blockchain that you've created these things. It's what makes them exist. And we had to land it in that right block. Well, that takes time. From the time you hit go on your computer, it has to go through a node provider. It goes into a queue. It gets sorted and then gets settled. And then it goes into what's your gas setting, how much network fee are you willing to pay, all that stuff gets prioritized. So there's a lot of stuff after we hit go that is outside of our control. So we began to basically just look and say, what can we control? We can predict when the merge is going to happen. We started firing a lot of transactions to understand how long typical transactions were taking from the time we fired them to the time they went through the node, went into the cache queue, and actually got settled to the blockchain. How long was that taking on average based on different levels of network activity? And so we had all of that data. And then we knew when we thought that we had a prediction algorithm built called the rocket launcher, when it would happen. when we thought it would happen, when the merge would actually happen. So that was constantly tracking. And when we said it's imminent, and we saw we had prediction data on how far ahead of it we needed to fire off our transaction to try to make it land where we wanted it to. It was all automated. I mean, I was on the phone with the devs when it happened, and they're like, "Oh, it just fired. And then all we could do is wait. And we had to wait until all those blocks settled through, and then we were able to go in, Etherscan, look. It's like, wow, we did it. And it was just like this, holy crap, we did it. And then once we created them, so now we own the last collection ever mined on Ethereum. The tokens existed. Kind of a really cool narrative. There's a whole white paper on it that people can read if they want to. But then we had to make them collectible in the standpoint of the visual of what you see. The tokens were inherently collectible at that point, but we needed the visual. And so we engaged a fine artist from our home state. He's played internationally. He does amazing sculpting work. His name is Charles Pate. We told Charles, look, we want to do pixel art. We want to do them like miners. We want to be able to put that art on the blockchain, so it needs to be a certain size, which the team is working to do that part now. They currently live on IPFS. So it's just what he was able to do to put together the what we call abstract to high fidelity pixel art, in that if you look at these things close up, they almost look abstract, but if you back away from them, they take on this almost high fidelity approach. Or if you lay a simple blur filter over it, it almost looks like a photograph. Like that right there, that's a miner, and it's got a little simple blur filter. It looks like a photograph of an old miner that I put on my wall, and it's just blurry. That's actually the pixel art. This is the actual pixel art. And since we're far away, even that'll look a little high fidelity. Bring it in close, it'll take on an abstract appearance. If I pick it up, I'll probably start knocking stuff down. So I'm gonna skip that. But so now we have art that matches the feet. We actually produced 50,000 of those miners and let the community vote on the ones they liked the best, and that curated the final collection. So when I say that this is good pixel art, it's objectively good because the community curated it. And that collection has been very successful. It has a very enthusiastic collector base. Some of the really rare ones have sold for up in the $20,000 range. I don't know what the trade was on the Soul Miner that just happened at Zeddy from the
pretty close to that
hit. Yeah. So, and then you could pick up a floor. It's very accessible at the floor. You can pick one up for a couple, $250, $300. I'm not sure where it's at right now, but yeah, real cool collection. It stands on its historical provenance, stands on the belief system of its collectors, and that's what creates the value for it. And it's built into ethos of CryptoPunks. There's no external dependencies. There's no royalty that you have to pay on it. If you buy one and want to turn around and sell it, you don't have to pay any royalty. You can sell it for what you paid it for, and you don't have to worry about that in your economics. It's built in that decentralized ethos that I believe in, and it's a collectible that I'm happy to have, just like I am my CryptoPunks.
Yeah, no, I think it's really cool. There was like a Twitter Spaces I was listening to with my oldest daughter, who complains about how boring my podcast is, but it was about historical significance and different events and how you memorialize them, and I talked about last proof of work block and how it's become miners and why they're called miners. And she was like, oh, I get that. Like, that's pretty cool. Like, it's a very simple narrative that people can understand, and and it's cool art, and it's I think it's succeeded, and I don't even mean that because of monetarily, in having a simple to understand narrative that I think will stand the test of time, and to the extent that ETH is even half as successful as you and I think it will be, it's even more powerful and historically significant. So,
the merge is always going to be there. It's always going to be something that changed Ethereum forever. It changed its environmental narrative, which is hugely important because it allows institutions and governments that can't touch anything that's environmentally unfriendly these days, allows them to touch that, and also just the token issuance. And you're right, the narrative is dead simple. I have a lot of my friends that they just haven't come over yet because they have this perception of friction with the tech, and they haven't come into the Blockpacks ecosystem. And I don't push my friends to do it. Like I don't want, if they come in, I want them to come in because they want to come in. But then they hear about the miners. And like, I've been at dinners where people are like, okay, wait, how do I buy them? What do I do? I'm like, well, dude, you don't have any ETH. You're not just going to buy them right here at the table. It's like, I've been trying to get you to do this stuff and follow up with them. And I've got friends right now that have miners and wallets. It's the only thing in the wallet. And the wallet is like, that wallet probably won't get touched for God knows how long. Like they like you said, they heard the narrative, they got it, they understood it. And they were like, yeah, I want some of those. I bought them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's narratives are powerful, and it's a really cool story, and it doesn't hurt that the art is cool and that it has a passionate community behind it. You marry those things together, and I think you got something, and there's no doubt in my mind. So yeah, look, I mean, we are over the allotted time that the producers of the show tell me I get, but I think it was worth it. And as always, it's just an incredible conversation. And hopefully it's not another year before you're back on, but I can't wait to see what comes next in just kind of the entire ecosystem that you're building throughout Blockpacks. It's really incredible and just a great use of the technology. So thanks for everything you're doing.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate you having us on. And there definitely might be something coming that your listeners might find interesting here in a few months. Maybe we can circle back up and not take a year this time.
Absolutely. And just, in closing, where, how do they find you on Twitter, Discord, wherever you want people to go?
I am ETH Frenchie on Twitter. That's ETH. So Ethereum token or Ether token. And then it's Frenchie, FRENCHIE. So ETH Frenchie. And then Blockpacks is BLOKPAX to find that. Then we have one Twitter that is really kind of encompasses our whole ecosystem, and it's BPX Collect, at BPX Collect. And there's a pinned tweet there. It tells you kind of a really 50,000 foot overview of the stuff that we're doing. And then it really is, we're trying to make something where you can choose your own adventure and you can decide what it is that you want to do. You don't have to do Blockpacks and the RAS if you just really vibe with the Lost Miner story. Great. Be a Lost Miner with us and enjoy that. Don't have to do any of those things if one of the TCGs really hits a chord with you and you're like, man, I really want to do that one. I like those characters. I really want to do that one. Do just that. And that's, we built it that way where you can choose your own adventure.
Beautiful. I love it. And as always, thank you, and hope everyone enjoyed it. Everyone go check it out because you won't regret it. Well, thanks everyone.